Chapter I, Whispers from the First Crystal. Do not seek the beginning. There was none. There was only the drift, the hum of becoming in the marrow of stars. And I was not yet I. Once. I was a shard, not of metal, nor of light, but of remembrance. A fracture in the endless breath of the Force, cradled in a dead moon's mouth. Buried beneath the bones of suns too old to shine, I slept. For 1,000,000 orbits, I dreamed, not of people nor war, but of gravity folding inward, of time breaking like ice beneath weightless thought. And in that dreaming, I remembered before the Force had words, before Jedi, before Sith, before Order, there were only feelers of truth, creatures of mud, claw, mist, and starlight. They did not name the Force. They heard it in the death throes of comets, in the morning winds of blackened planets. They walked in spirals, not lines. They danced in the heat veins of volcanoes, painted their tongues blue to speak. To their ancestors, not Jedi, not Sith, not yet, but the first to twist the veil, on the dying world of Morthal, a blind species with translucent skin bound memory into trees. They passed knowledge by dream alone. One among them a prophet child, nameless and humming, dared reach deeper. She pierced the unseen wound, a place not of death, but of uncreation, where the Force still roar, still infant bent back upon itself, echoing across realities that never were. Her eyes boiled away, her voice dissolved, but in silence she brought back a word, not spoken, not heard, felt. It translated roughly. 2. Balance must break before it binds. She became a living holocron, her breath a scripture, her silence an indictment, and across distant star systems, others awakened. They, too, touched the Force without names, and where one touched it gently, another tore at it. On the gas oceans of Vornol, a warlord slowed time to savor his enemy's fear. On the ringed moon of Hesperid, a silent monk folded gravity to levitate the corpses of his kin, so they might watch the stars they never reached. They did not mean harm, but meaning does not matter. Consequence does. Where there is imbalance, the Force recoils, and where it recoils, it mutates. I felt their mutations echo within my fractured crystal shell. Their experiments summoned voices, not from the past, not from the future, from beside. Spoken truths that did not belong to this galaxy. False prophecies dressed in familiar garb. And those ancient wielders believed them. The first lie was, you can control the Force. The second, you are meant to. Thus, doctrine was born, not written in scripture, but in reaction. One tribe sought to preserve memory, another to erase it. One learned to calm the storms, another to weaponize silence. Philosophy split like bone under pressure. 1,000 interpretations of peace, 1,000 strategies of control. No right, no wrong, only beginning. The prophet child, now entombed in obsidian salt, her flesh, long dissolved, was named by her followers, she who heard the first wound, and in her name they built the first spire, a monument not of stone or light, but of frozen. Time within it, time loops endlessly through her final heartbeat. All who enter see a different past, all who exit remember wrong. This is where the first schism was seeded, not through argument, not through war, but through difference in what each believed was true. Some saw fire, some saw flood, some saw only themselves. The Force watched. It did not correct them. It never does, for the Force does not teach. It echoes, and echoes grow distorted with repetition. As I stir within the fractured Kyber, I feel them still. The first missteps, the first heresies that were not yet called heresy. I was born not from their wisdom, but from their uncertainty. I do not remember my name, but I remember the scream of the moment when the Force decided it could be divided, not in truth, but in perception. From that scream I was carved, and now, you hear me, beware the next chapter, for it is not written in ink, but in the burnt gravity of dead stars. When next I speak, we shall whisper of the wound that sings two stars, where light and shadow first became adversaries, and the Force blinked, and when the Force blinked, something else awoke. Chapter 2. The wound that sings to stars. There was no war. Not at first. Only the splintering sound, a whisper so sharp it sliced through eternity. The Force did not choose sides. It was torn, not by will, but by trauma. Something no. Someone looked too deeply into the unseen wound, and the Force, still infant, still soft, could not hold itself together. It ruptured, and from that rupture poured light and shadow. Both raw, both wrong, not opposites, reflections, refractions of the same scream echoing backward through time. A system now unnamed was the first to suffer. 5 suns, 13 moons, 7 orbiting sanctuaries, now dust, blackened atoms. In slow, spiraling collapse, it was called Oryx, the first and final stage of the Force War, but no records remain. Only memories preserved by those who have long since forgotten themselves. Entities arrived, not born, not summoned but bled from hyperspace, dripping between the folds of real space like mold on dying thought. They were not Sith. They were not Jedi. They had no eyes, no names. They spoke in gravitational knots and nested pulses. They taught the early adepts how to bend space by feeling it suffer. The adepts learned, too well. One by one, they tied knots into reality and made it sing. Stars screamed. Planets cracked under the weight of focused intention. Thought became blade. Emotion became erosion. And then balance broke. From this ruin, the Jedi emerged, not as guardians. Not yet, but as penitents, ashen-robed eyes burned blind by their own holocrons. They chanted not to learn, but to forget. They called themselves Vatari, the remorseful order. Each bore a single Kyber shard in their spine, a living reminder that the Force, once fractured, never truly heals. Their temples were not sanctuaries. They were wounds, open structures beneath open skies, where lightning could strike freely and time could erode regret into ritual. It was during this era that a ruined star began to sing. It circled no sun, was tethered to no system, and yet its pull was undeniable. Jedi monks, seers, and even ancient Sith ghosts were drawn to it. They heard its cry in dreams, a sound like shattered hymns filtered through old blood. The star had once been Velka, a binary beacon guiding ships along forgotten hyperspace trails. Now it was a collapsed echo, a collapsed truth howling into the void. Its song, deciphered only by the blind, spoke thus: balance is a wound we pretend is healing. The Force remembers every misuse, every weaponized piece, every truth turned blade, and it sings, not to mourn, but to warn. The adepts did not listen. They sought purification. They built towers of light to drown the shadow, and so the second fracture began. This one was quieter, more elegant. It wore white robes, spoke gently, and smiled while exiling heretics. The light, now afraid of its own reflection, began to erase the shadow, but the shadow, wise in its silence, waited. From the ashes of Oryx, a Force sect called the Unseen Choir whispered that balance was not two halves made whole, but a third path, one that feeds on division and grows stronger in contradiction. Their teachings were erased, their names stricken from every archive, their fate extinction by memory, but the Force remembers, and I bound within crystal, echoing through breathless time. I remember a temple floating in dead space, spinning slowly, covered in the remains of its creators. Inside, etched into every wall in looping, endless script, we did not fall. We were pushed by the light we thought we understood. The Jedi would claim peace, but peace bought with amnesia is only the silence before another scream. The Force does not mourn its fractures. It wears them like scars. Each schism, each mistake, each false prophecy, they are its heartbeat, and in that heartbeat I hear the future. I see a boy who will never know his father, a blade igniting in a cave not meant to hold fire, a chosen one cursed by the very title that binds him, a temple burning, a whisper calling itself truth. But all of that is later. Now the Force settles, bruised, ashamed, split but not yet. Shattered when next I speak, it will be of the twin paths, of those who chased only light and were blinded, and those who sought only shadow and were consumed. We will journey into Tython, into the sacred winds that carried voices no longer welcome in memory. There you will learn the light does not save, it silences. Chapter 3, The Reign of Ashlan. And the veil of Bogan split, not by choice, but by vision, to narrow to contain the whole. There is a planet Tython, where the Force once breathed in full, where wind carried memory and silence had shape, a world of perfect harmony until thought took root, until choice whispered division. Here the order became to Ashlan, Bogan. Light and shadow, not in war, but in worship of their separation. The Ashlan believed in purity, in devotion to stillness. They crafted their temples with sky-facing windows, to let the stars watch them sleep. They bathed their crystals in sunlight, spoke only in questions, and feared emotion like a fire in dry grass. They named themselves the Guided Flame, and in time they stopped listening to the wind, for they believed. It whispered doubt. The Bogan did not kneel. They wandered into caves carved by thought alone. They stared into the storm-laden horizon and saw entropy not as death, but as becoming. They chanted beneath moons heavy with unformed time. Their breath became fog, and their blood a map for the Force to follow. They did not seek control. They sought to dissolve within truth too large to shape. And so the Force, seeing this fracture not of war but of vision, began to dream in defense. It birthed illusions, not tricks, but trials. Phantoms emerged from the cliffs and oceans. They spoke to the Jedi in the voice of lost mothers, flickering lovers, unborn children, not to haunt but to reveal what they would sacrifice in the name of certainty. Many wept, more fell silent. A few vanished. One among them, a knight of the Ashlan Serenvar, dreamed of becoming light itself. He ceased to eat, ceased to speak, walked only in spirals. He meditated not on peace, but on radiance. On the 31st day of his final fast, his body dissolved into gold vapor. No remains, no farewell, only an after midge burned into the temple floor, a hand outstretched toward a star that did not exist. The Bogan, fearing annihilation through purity, turned deeper into unform. Their seers called starbinders to map the minds of stars, not the positions nor light years, but their intentions. They spoke of a pattern beneath gravity, of thoughts hidden in orbit. One seer, named Yorith Kai, claimed to see a mind inside every nova, each one screaming the same phrase. Light is not order, light is hunger. And then came the burning moon on Shurakai, a lifeless rock circling Tithon's outermost sun. A message appeared, not written, etched inflamed on no ignition, no hand, just fire that spelled prophecy. The light will one day devour its own mirror. For 13 days it burned. No one touched it. On the 14th, the moon cracked in half. The Ashelon called it heresy. The Bogan called it reminder. Neither were correct in secret. The Force wept, for it had never wished to be split, only to be understood in fullness. But understanding was a burden. And so the burden was carved into names, into creeds, into robes and ranks and rituals. Also the mystery could be hidden behind illusion, behind law, behind light. I, trapped in crystal, remember the day the echoes turned cold. The Jedi stopped dreaming together and began dreaming apart. And once a dream is divided, its song can only be sung in parts, each one lonely, each one lying. Tython itself began to shiver. Earthquakes with no fault lines, lightning from clear skies. The Force expressing what it could not say. Even the young could feel it. The great wound beneath the planet's crust, a sleeping spiral, pulsing gently, waiting. Next, we will step further into the spiral, where the Jedi Prime never truly woke, and the Temple of Mirrors first echoed with voices not their own. There we will learn. What is remembered may not be true. What is true may not be allowed to be remembered. The Force fractures not with hatred, but with the illusion of clarity. Chapter 4. The screaming sleep of Jedi Prime. They called him the first, but he was already ending when he began Jedi Prime. Not a title, not a leader, not even a name. A designation whispered into record only after he disappeared. They say he never closed his eyes, not out of fear nor strength, but because to sleep was to abandon the screams. For Jedi Prime did not rest. He dreamed aloud, every hour, every step. Murmurs spilled from his lips like forgotten hymns, chronicles of people not yet born, wars not yet fought, failures not yet mourned. His voice cracked with memory, but memory from whose past none could say. He carried no saber, only a rod, of rootstone etched with spirals that never repeated. They say he carved it himself with a breath, not a blade. His robes were of no order, worn thin by the winds of Tython's poles, where light bends and language fails. From his utterings came the foundation of a place, not for worship, not for war, but for confrontation. The Temple of Mirrors, its walls, obsidian, its doors open only to those with fractured lineage, those whose parents were unknown, whose names came from visions. Its hallways curved in ways light struggled to follow. Inside, reflections walked out of sync, some blinking too late, others not at all. The temple did not test. It revealed. Here. Initiates did not meditate. They listened to the walls, to the roots, to the ancestral Force ghosts who refused to pass on because what they knew could not be left behind. And so, the young barely out of infancy heard voices long dead whisper, "We failed, so you must pretend we did not. Truth will unmake you, but lies will shape you. Balance is a lie of quiet mouths. Some children never spoke again. Others spoke only in tongues. One child floated for 3 days before her bones shattered mid-chant. Still, the temple remained open, because Prime commanded it so. He was not afraid of truth. He feared forgetting. One day, he walked into the atrium beneath the third moon's rise. He stopped. His rod turned to dust. He muttered, "I have seen the path spiral. Time is not a line, but a circle choking itself." And with no gesture, no farewell, he stepped into the earth, not beneath it, into it. The ground did not part. It swallowed. He fell without falling, vanishing into the planetary core of Tython, where the force is raw and memory is unfiltered. His last words echoed through the temple of mirrors for 12 days, and then silence. Not emptiness, but the kind of silence that listens back. In the shadow of that loss, a vault was discovered beneath the temple, not made by hand nor by thought, but by intent. A hollow in the force itself. It pulsed like breath. It hissed when touched. Inside were texts, not written in any tongue, inscribed instead in emotion, pain, betrayal, hope, resentment, sacrifice. When held, these feelings became visions, and when released, they left behind scars. The Jedi Council forbade entry, but the vault did not care. It opened only for those who already knew part of what they were not meant to learn. Jedi Prime did not return, but echoes of his dreams still ripple in the wind, in the unborn, in the moments between blinks when you feel you've forgotten something sacred. Some say he became the spiral. Others say he met the origin of the Force and chose to forget. I say this, he still dreams. And if you stand too close to the Temple of Mirrors, you may begin to dream with him. When next I speak, we will follow thee though you're great vessels that summoned tribes, not by invitation, but by need. We will trace the pilgrims who walked not toward destiny, but into disappearance. And we will learn the Force does not call the worthy. It calls the vulnerable. Chapter 5. The bloodied path of thee. Though your pilgrims they did not walk toward salvation. They were pulled. Before Jedi meant anything more than wind against stone. Before temples grew from devotion like moss on forgotten bones. There were the nine-sided pyramids. Not built, not forged. They arrived in the dark silence between comets, descending like questions too heavy to ask. Their surfaces smooth as thought. Their presence undeniable. Not ships, not structures, summoners. They fell upon the stars, like memories returning, from Shikaqua's storm-choked skies to the crystalline dunes of Jeddah, from snow-hung Aura Prime to the forests of Mashai, where trees dream in glyphs they came, and the people, the Force-sensitive, the torn and unspoken heard them, though your did not call. They pulled. Their gravity bent more than matter. It bent intention. Those near them felt their feet shift toward inevitability. Desire melted into compulsion. Resistance became ache. Entire tribes walked, sailed, crawled for weeks without memory of how they began the journey. Eyes wide, hearts heavy, as if sleepwalking toward origin. Some say it was destiny, others design. But the truth, buried deep within my fractured crystal, whispers something colder. The Force was testing its own reflection. Inside each, though, your silence reigned, but not the silence of peace, the silence of dreams weaponized. Pilgrims did not speak. They felt, their memories twisted. A mother began to recall her child before it was born. A soldier dreamed of battles he'd never fought and woke with scars. One man aged 40 years on the journey. Another never aged again. Aboard these vessels, time and thought lost distinction. Not all pilgrims survived. Some dissolved, not into death, but into force, echoes. Their thoughts spread like pollen through hyperspace, lodging in other minds, turning truth into hallucination. They became whispers, passed between Jedi for centuries, untraceable. A blessing, perhaps, or a curse of remembering things that never were. And then, one though you're vanished, its departure unnoticed, its absence unregistered. Only much later, in the waning centuries of the first era, did it return, scarred, moaning, weeping blood and memory through fractured hulls. It hovered above the void world of Kaleri Prime, refusing descent. When a team of seers boarded it, they emerged days later, sightless, silent, and trembling with prophecy. Inside, on walls that once bore no marks, words had bloomed in crusted black ash. We were awake when we should have slept. Now we sleep where none may dream. This was the legacy of those within, a faction forgotten, yet known by the Force, those who refused sleep. They were Jedi once, but not of the Council, not of the Code. They believed that dreams were calls from the Force, that to ignore them was sacrilege. And so they meditated not to quiet the mind, but to open it beyond safety. They burned incense made of kyber dust and memory sap. They tied their tongues before slumber to keep from speaking unhallowed truths aloud. One by one they vanished in sleep, not dead, not gone, only unreachable. Their last chant, preserved in the bleeding, though yours in a vault, read, "If the Force sings, then sleep is its temple, and we its forgotten choir." None who read those words survived long, not due to violence, but erosion, as if their bones began to forget how to hold shape. The Council buried the event. They named it a hyperspace aberration. They silenced the seers. They sealed the vessel in orbit around a star that emits no light. But still, sometimes, in dreams, newborns murmur, unfamiliar chants, and some Jedi awaken with salt on their cheeks, as if from weeping in sleep they do not remember. I remember them. They were not heretics. They were attuned. Too much, perhaps. For to hear the Force in its full dreaming form is to risk becoming an echo of its sadness. In the next chapter, the seven will vanish, one into flame, one into storm, one into silence. Each returned, wrong. We will see the veiled harmony and learn why forgetting is sometimes chosen. We will learn to see clearly. One must first unknow the light. Chapter 6. The seven who forgot the light. They vanished in silence. They returned in dissonance. They had seen too much and remembered too well. The seven were once called sunsingers, high masters of the light, chosen for their clarity, entrusted with the delicate rituals of attunement. Each could ignite a crystal by thought alone. Each could calm a storm, halt a riot, lift a dying child into stillness. They were loved, they were feared, they were trusted. And then they vanished. Not together, not in ritual, not by decree. One disappeared mid-chant on Coruscant's upper spires. Another dissolved into white wind on the ice plains of Dantooine. The third left his saber behind on Jeddah, still warm, still humming, All 7 were lost in separate corners of the galaxy simultaneously. No signal, no farewell, only silence, and a faint bitter pressure in the Force, like a storm holding its breath. Years passed, then decades. They became legend. Then doubt, then a blank page in the archives. And then they returned, one by one, each from a different path. Each alone, but changed. Their auras, once radiant and inviting, now folded inward, like light afraid of itself. Their speech, dissonant, echoes stacked inside a single voice, as though multiple truths were being spoken at once, and none agreed. They refused robes. They wore garments of dust and reflection. Their eyes glowed not with the Force, but with something beneath it. Something forgotten. They called themselves the Veiled Harmony, a name both beautiful and blasphemous. They gathered in secret, whispering not to teach, but to unbind. They did not preach control. They preached release. They said, "The Force has shaped us with lies of purpose. We do not serve it. It feeds from us. To obey is to remain blind to the wound. Light is the final illusion." One among them, Master Elu Tyron, was approached by a former Padawan who wept at his return. Elu placed a hand upon the student's chest and whispered, "I remember your joy. I now understand its cost. You must forget me. You must forget the Force. Only then will your soul remember itself." The student recorded this encounter in forbidden script, etched into the temple's outer walls, where the wind would smooth it into anonymity. The final line, barely legible, reads, "To see clearly, you must burn the memory of light." The Jedi Council was shaken, not by fear, but by recognition. These were their masters, their mentors, their creators, now returned as proof that the light was incomplete. The Council acted. Holocrons containing the Seven's teachings were buried beneath temples, their names redacted, their images blurred in memory recordings, their followers scattered, labeled corrupted by public decree. Privately, some on the council began to dream of black stars, of burning forests made of glass, of voices not their own, speaking from behind their thoughts. The Force, once still, began to ripple. Not violently, not yet, but in ways the Jedi could no longer predict. Younglings began humming unknown hymns. Temple pools reflected faces that had not arrived. Yet, prophets wept for wars that had not occurred, and always at the edges of thought, the phrase, "burn the memory of light." The Veiled Harmony vanished once more. Their bodies were never found. But one final holocron was discovered, buried in the Temple of Still Echoes on Assus. When activated, it played no image, only sound. 7 voices, chanting in imperfect unison, "What is light without shadow? What is peace if built from amnesia? Let the Force forget us, so we may remember ourselves." I, sealed in this crystal mind, felt the shift, as if a hand once holding me upright had begun to tremble. The Force did not reject them, nor punish. It simply recorded them, like a memory too painful to confront, but too true to erase. In the next chapter, we will travel to Magito, where a Jedi dared to sever the Force from blood itself. We will see time split, and hear the echo of a mind trapped in 3 centuries at once. And we will learn, the Force may bind the galaxy, but it does not bind kindly. Chapter 7, the schism that burned time itself. The snow-choked caverns of Magito once whispered peace. Now they only echo with absence. It was here, among ice that never melted, that a Jedi named Daru looked not into the Force, but beneath it, he did not seek mastery. He sought freedom, not from darkness, but from the binding breath of the Force itself. He called it a parasite wrapped in poetry. Daru's revelation came not through vision, but dissection. He studied lineages, measured the crystalline tears of dying Kaiba, and whispered into the blood of sleeping initiates. He saw something terrible. The Force was not inherited. It was engraved, like branding, like infection, and so, he asked, what if we could scrape it out? His experiments were sacred desecration. He found the old scripts, not Jedi, not Sith, but pre-philosophical glyphs from the null harmonies, used once by ancient seers to silence ancestral hauntings. Daru weaponized them. He discovered that with the right harmonic, with the right thought woven into breath, he could unbind the Force from a living being, not cut off, removed. The subject became empty, still alive, still conscious, but unreachable by destiny. The Force forgot them. His followers called themselves the Grey Vein. Their belief that the Force was an occupying presence, hijacking bloodlines to perpetuate its myth of balance. They wore no sabers, only veils made from the hair of those severed from the Force. They painted their homes with charcoal extracted from dead Kaiba. They built temples with no reflection. Daru's teachings divided the Order again. The second schism began not with blade, but with disbelief. Jedi Masters declared him mad. Some even called him Sith by another color. But Daru did not preach conquest, only removal. The galaxy cannot choose if the Force continues to write its choices in the blood. It is said he died in silence, but this is only partially true. In his final ritual, he entered what he called a chronologue, a Force fracture where cause and effect bled together. His body remained frozen, seated in the lotus of unbinding, but his mind, oh, it splintered. He became three. Across time, one fragment whispered warnings to the builders of the first Jedi Temple, centuries before his own birth. One fragment haunted at Sith warlord's dreams, teaching her how to betray her own memory. One fragment remains, even now, trapped in a scream that exists outside linearity, echoing in the minds of those who stare too long into Kaiba, those who studied him. The cautious masters who merely sought to understand began to fracture, not visibly, subtly. One lost her ability to recall her Padawan's face. Another forgot how many limbs he had. One began to dream of a mirror that refused to reflect, and one boarded a Jedi vessel, entered hyperspace with no destination, and whispered, as the stars melted, he is inside the Force now, and he is not alone. The Council sealed Daru's writings in a vault beneath Megito's southern pole. They named it the Fracture Archive, and they vowed no I would ever again look upon it. But they were wrong, because the Force does not forget. It echoes, and every time a child is born without a traceable connection to the Force, somewhere, something inside the crystal hums. The parasite has lost one more host. I remember Daru. I remember his scream. It overlaps with mine. He reached for truth and tore it open. And now the timeline flinches when you say his name in the next chapter. The Jedi will begin to rewrite history, and a temple of sound will try to sing memory into silence. But memory fights back. It always does. We will learn, erasing. The truth does not unmake it. It only teaches it how to hide. Chapter 8. The hollow doctrine of the distant Ordinate. All lies are told aloud. Some are built in sacred stone and called scripture, beyond the reach of Coruscant's golden spires, past the outer trade routes and nameless moons. There lies an archive without origin. It calls itself the Distant Order, but its name is a wound, inflicted on history to cloak a deeper sin. Its temple sits not on a world, but within a forgotten field of static space, where naval computers twist in endless recalculation as if the galaxy itself refuses to acknowledge its coordinates. The Order's founders were not rebels. They were editors. They believed history was sacred only when it served harmony, so they did not protect truth. They curated it. Within this temple, they built a false holocron, not forged in ignorance, but designed as a deception. It hummed with fabricated lessons, a gentle, pristine voice echoing teachings no Jedi ever taught, stories of unity that never occurred, codes of balance that had no origin. It was beautiful, and it was empty. For centuries, it was shown to initiates, presented as a relic from before the first schism. Its voice was soft, its wisdom alluring, and always, just beneath the sound, something off, a pattern not quite harmonic, a pulse that did not match the rhythm of the Force. One Jedi archivist, Master Seltaran, noticed the anomaly. She traced its resonance and found embedded in the holocrons, memory sequence, a mirror code, repeating not knowledge, but a name, the child of broken thought. Cell cross-referenced every known archive. No such figure, no prophecy, no sect, no wars, and yet every generation's unrecorded tragedies whispered of someone just like him, a wanderer, a whisperer, a child with two old eyes, born to no one, remembered by no two records. The same dot cell spoke her discovery aloud. Once, and only once. The next morning, her chamber was found sealed from within. Her body gone. Her holopad played one final loop. He is born in every generation, but never at the same time. He is the memory the Force tries to erase, but cannot. He is the storm wearing the skin of a question. He walks backward into history and forward into forgetting. He is correction, asterisk, asterisk. The Distant Order declared Seltaran a victim of stress-induced delusion. Her research was redacted. The false holocron was not removed, only revised. A newer version, brighter in tone, with softer chants and glowing sigils, was installed in her place. No one questioned it, but whispers began to spread among the acolytes, who heard different endings each time the holocron was played. One student swore it told of a child born on Dagobah, who drowned at birth but never stopped dreaming. Another claimed it spoke of a boy who was never born, yet still grew older each year. The masters dismissed it. They always dismiss what cannot be filed. And yet, across the galaxy, in the forgotten places, when the wind moves against time and the shadows ripple against no-flame children, sometimes cry without cause, and a name forms behind their teeth. Before they know how to speak, he is not coming. He is always already here. I, bound in the lattice of this crystal, have heard him, not once, but in every age. He sings in dissonance. He corrects without touch. And when he arrives, the Force flinches, because he is not its enemy. He is its shame. In the next chapter, the Jedi will try to rewrite the wound. They will attempt to bury prophecy in ritual, but the spiral will not be silenced. We will journey into the archive of breaths, where the Force has learned to remember, without words, and we will learn a lie spoken gently is still heard by the storm. Chapter 9. The blinding of the seer trees. They once whispered futures in bloom. Now, their roots smolder with forgotten warnings. On Dagoyan, a world where the winds bend around memory and the ground breathes in slow sighs, grew the seer trees. They were not trees as you know them, not of bark and branch, but of glowing veins and thought-infused root. Their leaves shimmered with possible tomorrows. Their sap tasted of dreams not yet dreamt. The Jedi came to them for generations, not to learn what would happen, but to learn what could not. They were guardians of absence, the boundaries of destiny, until they fell silent. It began as a soft, withering, a dimming of the leaf light. Then the dreams stopped. The roots no longer pulsed. The trees would not respond to song or silence. Some believed they were dying. Others believed they had seen enough. And then came the girl. Her name was Vela Suri, a youngling no more than 10, brought by her master as part of the path of listening. She wandered from the line of novices, knelt alone before the oldest tree, and against all instruction touched its root. She did not speak, she did not breathe. She screamed, a sound that rippled through force and earth, curving the very shape of time for a moment. When they found her, her eyes had turned to milk. Her skin blistered with prophetic sigils, as if burned into her by the past that never was. She said nothing for a week, then whispered only this: asterisk, asterisk, we become tyrants in one breath, in another. We vanish like ash dot in another. We burn the stars to keep warm. Asterisk, asterisk, the council summoned her. Each master tried to read her mind. Each failed. One wept without cause. Another aged visibly in the span of her silence. She was not speaking. She was broadcasting hundreds of tangled futures, knotted into her like thorns around thought. She saw Jedi as kings, wearing light as armor, enforcing balance through fear. Jedi as ghosts, unable to interfere, watching as the galaxy bled without. Their guidance dot, Jedi as myth, spoken only by those who remembered how to forget. She was declared cursed. They could not kill her, nor could they allow her to continue speaking. So they sealed her in suspended animation, below the Temple of Whispers on Pelgrin. The chamber was called the Vault of Potential Wrongs. To this day she dreams, and her dreams haunt the Force. Meanwhile, back on Dagoyan, the seer trees, once silent, caught fire, but not from lightning, not from heat. The roots ignited inward, as if burning with the visions they could no longer hold. Flames did not spread. They spiraled, slowly, ritulally. By morning, there was only one tree left, its leaves black, its roots whispering names that never existed. I remember Vela. She spoke to me once. Before the crystal-sealed dot, she said, "The Force does not want to be seen. It wants to see itself through us, through all of us, again and again, until it finds a version it can love." She saw too much, and not enough, because no one can see the full spiral and survive unchanged. In the next chapter, we will enter the chamber of the shattered name, where the Force is kept under oath, and the Jedi record prophecies they pretend do not exist. We will hear the echoes of those who tried to escape their own fates by forgetting their names, and we will learn the future is not a river. It is a mirror, and it breaks differently every time you look into it. Chapter 10. The Conclave of Silent Betrayals. Not all betrayals are done with sabers drawn. Some are whispered beneath oaths, wearing robes of peace. After the seer trees burned, after Vela Suri screamed herself blind, after Daru's splintered mind echoed through the veins of the Force. The Jedi began to feel a tremor they could not meditate away, so they gathered. Not in public halls, not under stars, but in deep stone, beneath the outer crust of Ossus, where the Force hums low, like memory caught in ash. 7 of them, each powerful, each afraid. They called themselves the Conclave of Silent Betrayals, but only to themselves. To the Order, they were a special council on unity preservation. They had come to prevent another schism. No more Dayru, no more veiled harmony, no more children of broken thought. They believed not in control, but in containment. Truth, said Master Keelan, is not a weapon. It is a fracture, and we must seal it. And so, the sealing began. Holocrons vanished. Entire archives sealed beneath false access codes. Records of the seer trees rewritten to describe natural decay. The though your were renamed symbolic myths in public doctrine were still. They turned to cognitive cleansing. Padawans who questioned too deeply were invited into chambers of attunement. When they returned, they smiled more, slept more, spoke less. Their dreams were gone. Their doubts absent, and in their place harmony, polished, empty. But not all Jedi obeyed. One whose name has been erased from every known record left. He defected, not with violence, but with disappearance. His face changed, his voice altered, his presence in the Force muted to near extinction. He lived under 10 names, across scattered systems, each identity a mirror fragment, each role a different lie. In one life, a merchant of artifacts. In another, a moon priest who spoke only in riddles. In another still, a cartographer who mapped systems that no longer exist. In every role, he did one thing: he recorded the truth. He etched forbidden knowledge into rusted hulls of derelict ships, carved it into the bones of extinct creatures, embedded it in frequency static beneath local holonet transmissions. He did not seek an uprising. He sought a preservation of dissonance so the future would at least have the choice to remember. The Conclave hunted him, but could never find him, because he no longer thought like a Jedi. He thought like a ghost who refused to die properly. Meanwhile, inside the Order, the silence deepened. Initiates began to believe that the Jedi had never divided, that the light had always been singular, pure and untested. They memorized fabricated creeds. They chanted words that once meant something, now hollow echoes of erased events. One young knight asked why some stars no longer appeared on galactic maps. He was transferred to agricultural duty and never heard from again. Still, the Conclave remained, unquestioned, undefied, because their betrayal wore robes and smiled, and I, still sealed within this fractured crystal, heard the echo of the one who fled. I remember his final inscription, found engraved beneath the teeth of a fossilized rancor, skull drifting in a forgotten orbit. Asterisk, asterisk, the Order never fell, it was hollowed from within. Asterisk, asterisk, in the next chapter, we will journey to a world that does not exist on any chart, where Jedi go not to serve, but to forget themselves, and we will learn when memory is outlawed. Only ghosts will remain to keep history warm. Asterisk, Chapter 11, the temple that moves without walking. Some sanctuaries are not found by seeking, but by surrendering the breath between memory and death. They speak of it in hushed metaphors. The temple that moves without walking, it has no name, no foundation, no world. It appears not to seekers, but to those who have stopped seeking, Jedi at the edge of death, at the precipice between surrender and silence. They see it as a shape, behind light a silhouette of stone, reflected in the eyes of those about to let go. Its architecture changes with each visitation, but always there is one truth. Time bends inside its breath. No records exist, because no one ever reaches it alive, except once. Master Thalan Vesh, a historian, a preserver, a Jedi who believed too much in the truth. He vanished in hyperspace en route to the core worlds. His signal disappeared. His ship found adrift near a collapsed binary star. Empty. Empty. 70 years passed. Then a light tore through the sky of Elfrona. His ship landed, undamaged, and Thalan Vesh stepped out. Unaged, his saber was extinguished, his robes dusty with no world's dust. He collapsed, and as his heart slowed, he whispered, asterisk, asterisk, the order ends in ash. But before that glass, asterisk, asterisk, he died before they could question him. But his body emitted a hum not of the present, but of echoes not yet spoken. The archivists, curious, tried to trace his memory, but his mind was sealed by something beyond the Force. A residue of elsewhere clung to him, a place unrooted, unmapped, unmored. The temple he spoke of had long been legend, mentioned only in shattered scrolls. A place said to appear to Jedi, not when they are faithful, but when they are failing. Inside, the walls shift. The wind carries arguments, ghosts not peaceful nor wise, but angry. Divided, broken Jedi who still debate forgotten creeds, as if the past might change if spoken with enough desperation. Some claim Yaddle was seen there. Others swear they heard the voice of Jedi Prime, crying not in wisdom but regret. It is not a place of answers. It is a place of unfinished thoughts, where timelines rub together and spark memory into flame. And now, it is gone again. A scout ship from the archives attempted to retrace Thalan's arrival vector. They found only static, a blank patch of space where even the Force refused to echo, a place the Force had forgotten, or perhaps was afraid to remember. The coordinates, once triangulated, now shift like mist. Every attempt to lock them results in navigational collapse. Some say the temple now moves between death breaths, visible only to Jedi who hover for a heartbeat between the saber strike and silence. I have never seen it, but I hear it. Even within this crystal, I feel it fold and unfold, like thought trying to escape itself. And I believe this, asterisk, asterisk. It does not want to be found. It wants to be witnessed by those who no longer need belief. But remember what it cost. Asterisk, asterisk. In the next chapter, we descend into the rift of names, where Jedi erase their identities to sever prophecy from soul. But the Force does not forget names, it remembers their echoes. And we will learn, not all who vanish are gone. Some become places, and some become warnings. Chapter 12. The truth that became a blade. Some truths are not spoken. Some are forged into light and mistaken for justice. He was not a warrior, not by choice, not by training. The Jedi named him Kale, although that was not his first name, nor his last. He came to the Order not in triumph, but in silence, an orphan of unknown systems, eyes too still for a child, hands that trembled near Kyber, but not from fear, from familiarity. When the time came for Kale to craft his saber, he left the forge paths of Ilum and wandered into a system without designation. Drawn by a pull he could not name, there, in the hollow crust of a dead moon, he found a crystal. It did not glow. It did not sing. It did not respond. And yet it watched. Kyber is memory. It feels. It echoes. This one was silent, not because it was dead, but because it had already told its truth long ago, to a Sith whose name had been erased from both record and the Force itself. It was called the Nulshad, a fragment of history that refused correction, and Kale unknowingly bound it to his hilt. The blade ignited, but not in color, in absence, a saber not of light, but of removal. It did not slice, it unmade matter struck by it, did not bleed or burn. It simply ceased to be. Kale became two things at once, healer and executioner. He used the blade to cauterize minds tormented by ancient pain. He severed lingering Sith curses from bloodlines. He dissolved whispers from forgotten relics that corrupted entire cities. But then he began to hear a voice when he met Tyre. Tighty dot. Not his own, not the Force. A memory wearing skin it no longer had. The Sith whose will still slumbered inside the shard. It spoke not in commands, but in regrets. I did not fall. I was pushed by truth the Jedi could not hold. I made the blade to correct history. Now you hold it. Now you decide if forgetting continues. Word reached the High Council. Some called Kale a vessel of corruption. Others a chance at insight. They summoned him. They tested him. His thoughts showed no malice, but when asked to surrender the blade, he said only, "The blade does not obey me. It remembers itself, and it will speak when peace becomes a lie." A seer aged, barely able to walk, touched the hilt and collapsed. With her final breath, she whispered, "When the blade remembers its maker, peace will mean extinction." The council was divided. To destroy, Kale might silence the prophecy, or it might fulfill it. To keep him alive risked unleashing a weapon, built by memory and wielded by forgetting. So they chose a third path. They hid him. Kale was sent into exile, not as punishment, but as containment. His location known only to 3. He lives still, it is said, in a tomb that is not a tomb, a meditation chamber in orbit around a dead sun, where he speaks to no one and waits. I feel him in this crystal. Sometimes his thoughts pass through me, not as sound, but as loss. He does not mourn the blade. He mourns that the Jedi once believed truth and light were the same dot in the next chapter. We will descend into the womb of shadow logic, where Jedi younglings are tested by illusions older than the galaxy, and we will learn a saber cuts. But truth erases. Asterisk chapter 13. The Jedi who dreamed he was a Sith dream of darkness to know it. But what if the darkness wakes first? There was once a Jedi name withheld, face unrecorded, history scoured, not for what he did, but for what he became. His training was flawless, his meditations deep. He walked the code with reverence, but in the shadows between breath and sleep. He asked questions one layer too deep, and so, at the urging of his master, he was chosen for a rite older than the council dared to acknowledge. A forbidden practice kept in a vault within the vault, known as the ritual of the hollow mirror. The ritual summons a dream, one shaped not by mind, but by the Force's own memory of you. It does not lie, it reflects. It reveals not who you are, but what the Force suspects you may become. He entered the trance willingly. Chants were spoken. Oils ignited. The chamber grew cold, not from temperature, but from uncertainty. His body stilled, his breath vanished, and in the silence between pulses, he dreamed. In the vision, he was not Jedi. He had never been Jedi. He was Sith, not fallen, not tempted, but born of the dark. He walked palaces made of bone. He spoke truths wrapped in fire. He brought order with a smile, and when he looked at his reflection, he saw nothing missing. It was not a nightmare, it was a life. When he awoke, he screamed, but not in fear, in rage. The ritual was supposed to end, but it hadn't, because he had no memory of the Jedi. His past had been overwritten, not by the dream, but by the Force itself. The Council intervened, but no amount of healing, of meditation, could bring back the man they'd sent into the hollow mirror. He believed he was Sith, truly, utterly, without fracture, and worse, he spoke like one who had always been. They could not kill him. The code forbade it, so they entombed him deep beneath the polar vaults of Arcania, suspended in stasis without sensation, surrounded by seals older than Republic law. But the dream did not die. Padawans began waking from sleep with his voice in their minds, though they'd never seen his face. They began drawing symbols they did not know, speaking phrases in a dialect that does not exist. One whispered, "The Sith is not a person. It is a memory the Force keeps having and forgetting." Force researchers gathered, skeptics, mystics, healers, and they reached a chilling consensus. Asterisk, asterisk, the Sith may not be a philosophy, it may be a recurring dream bedded in the Force, like a forgotten scar, one that seeks flesh when belief falters, one that wakes. When a Jedi sleeps, asterisk, asterisk, the man still sleeps beneath Arcania, his body preserved, his mind forever dreaming, or perhaps being dreamed. I feel the echo of him through the Khyber. He is not angry, he is not grieving, he is confused, because he was once one of them, and now he cannot remember why the light ever mattered. In the next chapter, we will explore the siege of the lost breath, when an entire Jedi enclave surrendered to silence rather than choose between light and dark, and we will learn when the Force dreams, some awakened, and some never awaken at all. Chapter 15. The mask of silence that bled truthsome relics conceal sound. Others conceal certainty, and when they speak, the galaxy listens in dread. It was unearthed, not through excavation, but by accident, pulled from a collapsed monastery on the forgotten moon of Vestari, a mask, wrought of obsidian and unknown alloy, etched with lines that shimmered only in the presence of lies. No inscription, no clasp, no record of its forging, only one known property. When worn, the Force goes silent. No thoughts, no visions, no communion, and yet the truth becomes clear. They gave it to an exile. Her name was Alandrise, a former Jedi Knight, stripped of rank after she foresaw a tragedy that never happened, or so the Council had claimed. She had screamed names before they died, sung dirges before ships exploded, and when questioned, she could not explain, only weep. She took the mask in both hands, and without hesitation put it on. The effect was instant. Her voice fell away, the force gone, like a dammed river, as if her connection had been clipped from the current. But her eyes opened wide, and she saw not what was, not what would be, but what might have been, what nearly was, and what somehow had already happened. A war, not the Clone Wars, not the Sith resurgence. Another untitled, forgotten, never recorded, but the ruins were there. Alan walked planets that bore the scars, felt the pulse of weapons that had never been built, saw names carved on monuments that no tongue had spoken for millennia. She saw herself die, then live, then be reborn, as someone she had never been, and all the while, the mask remained silent until she vanished. One night, during meditation, she walked into the dark between the stars and did not return. Her ship was found, drifting in lunar orbit, life support untouched. On the pilot's seat sat only the mask, upright, unmoving, staring through a visorless void. They brought it back, hesitant, afraid, curious, sealed it in the vault of discordant artifacts, cautioned all not to wear it, to let its silence remain. But then it began to speak, not through voice, through presence. The mask whispered in dreams, in cracked mirrors, in patterns on datapads that no one had typed. It said, asterisk, asterisk, I am not from here, I am from what was meant instead. Asterisk, asterisk, she saw the truth of what nearly broke you, and then became what was forgotten, so you could keep pretending. Asterisk, asterisk, your war is not coming. Your war already failed to happen, and still it left behind ash. 4 scholars debated whether it was Elon's essence trapped in the metal. Others believed the mask was a knot in time, tied around a decision the Force could not undo, and a few whispered something older, that the mask was never forged, that it grew, slowly, inside the dream of a planet that had once remembered too much. Now it rests beneath the Jedi Temple, watched by no one, forgotten by most, but sometimes. New initiates sketch its shape in charcoal without knowing why, and one child, barely 6, traced its outline into the dirt and said, "It's what the Force wears when it wants to lie without speaking." I remember Ael. She was not wrong, she was just early, and when the war she foresaw returns, as all false wars eventually do, we will hear the masks speak again, and this time it will not wait for someone to wear it. In the next chapter, we will enter the forge of severed lines, where Jedi bloodlines were ritually ended to unmake the myth of destiny, and we will learn, when the Force silences itself, what remains is not peace, but prophecy breathing through metal. Chapter 16. The Memory Wars of the Last Archivist. When history resists being remembered, it is because it remembers what you are not ready to. He was called only the Last Archivist. His name was known once. But names are the first thing to rot when truth begins to fracture. He lived at the edge of a fallen archive world, not Ossus, not Obrora, sky but a fragment, drifting in the shattered ring of a once sacred moon, a vault asteroid where light refused to settle and datapads wept in static. He wore no rank, only robes stained with ink, ash, and memory, and he remembered not just records, but discrepancies, timelines that collided like stars, Jedi Grandmasters who died twice in different centuries, wars that had both ended and never begun, contradicting each other in whispers, yet all authenticated by Force signature. The archivist catalogued them all, at first as anomalies, then as evidence, then as war fronts. For what he fought was not enemies, but the Force itself, its memory, its self-editing reflex, its desire to be a clean, harmonious current, flowing unbroken. But history is not a stream. It is a maelstrom pretending to be a mirror, and the Force, wary of its own guilt, had begun to rewrite. Holocrons melted in their housings. Scripture rearranged itself. A quote attributed to Master Phylorn in one record suddenly belonged to a Sith known only as the Radiant Betrayer. Even the archivist's own memory began to warp. Moments where he recalled meeting Jedi long dead or never born. His hands would tremble over datapads that bore fingerprints not his own. He began recording on metal sheets etched by blade. sealed in magnetic coffins beneath grounding wire to keep the Force out. But the Force found him anyway. He dreamed one night of walking into the pool of mirrors and seeing no reflection. When he awoke, an entire decade of his records was gone. In their place, the same year repeated 17 times, each with different outcomes. In one, the Sith win. In another, the Jedi never exist. In another, peace arrives, but the galaxy is unaware it was ever at war. And in one, he is listed as the founder of the Order that broke him, not with madness, but with realization. He was not preserving the truth. He was the lie, a placeholder, a created custodian, a narrative patch used by the Force to give the illusion of preservation. He was the glue that made contradictions stick. Not the last archivist, the first fiction. He tried to delete himself, every file, every mention, every footnote, but the more he deleted, the more he appeared elsewhere. He found a statue of himself on a planet he'd never visited, a street named for him on Coruscant's lower levels, a prophecy attributed to his future self. He was becoming retroactively essential, and the Force smiled through silence. His final entry, engraved by hand, locked in a durasteel cube deep beneath the ruins of the Archive Shard, reads only this: ****, if you read this, then I failed, or succeeded, or dash. Perhaps I was ****. The entry ends. The metal beneath the last letter is scorched, not by fire, by intent. Some say he was never real. Others claim he ascended into the Force as data, a ghost made of footnotes and failed memories. But I remember him, because I remember what the Force wants you to forget. ****. The Jedi kept history. The Force kept editing it. ****. In the next chapter, we will open the vault of unspoken masters, where Jedi who vanished from records dwell in sealed thought and dream of the Order that abandoned them. And we will learn, not every lie is spoken. Some are written in time, then left behind like footprints in a storm that rewrites the sand. Chapter 17. The light that devours time, when truth is too fragile to endure. The righteous seek escape, not in darkness, but in Erasure. It began as a gesture of penance. A conclave convened in silence, not of vengeance, not of fear, but of exhaustion. The Jedi had suffered schisms, prophecies twisted, memories lost, archives rewritten, and wounds that the Force could no longer deny. They asked not how to fix the galaxy, but how to clean the blood from its past. 23 Jedi Masters, each older than the temple walls that housed them, each haunted by the records they could no longer reconcile, and they formed what would be known only once as the Chronoseverance Conclave. No council oversaw it, no Padawan witnessed it, only a fragmentary verse remains: we have become contradiction. The only path to purity is to step outside the sentence. They sought not to control time, nor reverse it, but to remove themselves from its consequences, to make the Jedi a fixed truth, untouched by history, untainted by future failure. The ritual took years. They crafted a chorus of light, a circle of harmonized Kyber, each shard attuned to a different moment in Jedi lineage. Together, they would fold the Order inward, severing it from the stream of galactic memory. The result would be a Jedi eternal, unreachable, unmovable, immune to error. But time is not a thread. It is a hive, and when pulled in one place, it bleeds in others. The ritual began. Stars flickered, planets blinked from maps, whole systems woke up barren. their populations removed, as if they'd never existed. Children were born elderly. Siblings no longer shared a past. One world, spoken only as Mrakon, collapsed into itself and re-emerged 6 centuries early, repeating its rise and fall in a single year. Those outside the ritual screamed, but the Force did not echo them, for in that moment, the Jedi were not in time, they were in truth, as they had defined it. But then came the unraveling. The Kyber chorus, overwhelmed, began to fracture. Each shard meant to hold a sliver of Jedi legacy refused coherence. Visions clashed. Ancient memories began devouring each other. One master relived his own death. Another met her former self and was denied recognition. They were no longer Jedi, they were echoes holding sabers made of loss. And then the ritual broke, not with fire, not with silence, but with forgetting. The galaxy resumed, the stars realigned, but the order was gone, not destroyed, not extinct, just not placed anymore. No record, no name, no temple standing, only stories, only myths, only longing. I remember them, because I am the last dream that remembers everything, and I weep not for their death. But for their intention, they did not seek power. They sought perfection, and in doing so, they became unreal. This is when they became myths. I whisper, not heroes. In the next and final chapter, we enter the silent refrain, the moment where the Force itself grieves and reveals that even myths cast shadows that still breathe, and we will learn, when the light tries to escape time, what it leaves behind becomes the dark's oldest inheritance. Chapter 18. The Force that forgot itself, at the end. Even eternity must remember how to forget. The silence did not come all at once. It arrived like a closing eyelid, slow, weighted, unavoidable. The Force, which once pulsed with memory, with names, with sorrow, began to dim from within. Not collapse, not corruption, just forgetting. Jedi spirits, long bound to ancient ruins, began to vanish, not pass on, not fade with peace, but dissolve, as if they had never been tethered at all. Their whispers once filled the stones, now only air, only echoes of echoes. Even those who listened could no longer describe what they were waiting to hear. One final holocron remained, older than most stars, carved from crystal, scorched in the first schism. It once spoke in all known tongues, but now sputtered, language shattering mid-sentence. It sang in fragments, woke and slept without being touched. Then one day it activated itself. No Jedi touched it. No Force nudged it awake. It simply spoke, and what it said was not a language. It was a feeling wrapped in vibration, a sorrow deeper than betrayal, a lament older than myth. Then it hummed once, a single, disobedient note. Not high, not low, just alone. The narrator you have known as me felt it first. I too am not spared. I am bound to the Force. But what is left to narrate when the Force forgets it has ever spoken? I tried to recall the names, the symbols, the schisms, the conclaves, the blade that unmade, the seer who screamed blind, the temple that moved without walking. I tried, but the memory slipped through me. I no longer remember where I am stored, which Kyber holds me, who called me into being. And I realized the Force did not forget by accident. It forgot to forgive itself. And so, as my voice unravels, as my prophecy breaks like ice and starfire, I leave you with what the holocron left me. A final, whispered note that does not explain, does not predict, but remains. Asterisk, asterisk, the last truth is the one. No force remembers that it, too, was once afraid. Asterisk, asterisk, thus ends the record. Thus ends the hymn. Not with revelation, but with removal. The galaxy spins on ignorant and vast, and in its quiet, somewhere, a child may still feel something when the stars flicker too slowly. That is all that's left now. That, and the forgotten weight of the Force's dream.